Very much. National Security Institute founder Jamil Jaffer joins me now. Jamil, is it time for the economic sanctions that President Trump has been talking about, particularly with his strike overnight?
Well, look, it's what I think is really important here is to ensure that we're putting the pressure on both Putin and Zelensky to come together and find a negotiated solution to this conflict. At the end of the day, it doesn't appear that Zelensky is going to be able to win unless the U.S. puts in a tremendous amount of weapons. It doesn't appear President Trump is ready to do that. So given that, we got to keep the pressure up on Putin to get to a deal. He's saying he wants to do a deal, but it's not clear what the outlines of that are because he's not willing to agree to let other countries come in and do security guarantees without Russia being a part of that, and that's a real problem.
But isn't this drone missile strike a slap in the president's face in terms of his efforts to bring peace to the region?
Well, this is the biggest challenge. Every time President Trump thinks he's got a deal with Vladimir Putin, he goes in and comes over the top with more attacks and more weapons. The president hasn't been able to get him to agree to a ceasefire. But at a minimum, if you're going to go try and work out a peace deal, you can't keep hitting hard, hitting American facilities, American-owned factories. That's a real problem. It's going to make President Trump angry. That's not a place you want President Trump because we've seen in the past he's doubled down in Ukraine when President Putin does things like this.
Well, Jamil, listen to what VP Vance had to say about Russia-Ukrainian negotiations ongoing. Listen.
Number one is Ukraine wants to know that it's not going to get invaded again by Russia. It wants to know that it's got territorial integrity long into the future. The Russians want certain pieces of territory, most of which they've occupied, but some of which they haven't. We shouldn't say that they can't sit down until you've figured out every little detail. Sometimes them sitting down is what facilitates figuring out those details.
Jamil, the big kahuna, the big question is whether any security guarantee is going to prevent Russia from invading Ukraine again.
Well, David, this is exactly the problem. We know that in 1994, the United States, the UK, the Ukraine, and the Soviet Union, Russia, agreed that there will be no violations of Ukraine's territorial integrity when Ukraine handed over its nuclear weapons that it had on its territory. And, of course, Russia has now violated that twice in 2014 and again in 2022. So the idea that Vladimir Putin is saying we have to be part of any security arrangement and we have to be able to sign off on any defense of Ukraine makes no sense because the most likely invader of Ukraine is Russia, having violated their agreements in 1984 twice since then.
Finally, President Trump has ruled out sending troops to Ukraine, but he says the U.S. could provide air support as part of a deal to end the war. Should the U.S. send air support to Ukraine? I know that it's not boots on the ground, but it's pilots flying over the territory.
Well, look, I've long thought, David, and we actually said publicly, me and General Keith Alexander said publicly that at the beginning of this war, the U.S. should have provided air cover for Ukraine to defend them against the very kind of strikes we're seeing today and we've seen over the last 2.5 years in this war. So I think that's one of the key things. The question is, what does that mean? Does that mean air support now to help push back against Russia, or does it mean air support later as part of a negotiated settlement? My guess is it means the latter. And if that's what it is, then so be it. But if we can provide air support today, that would help defend Ukraine better against the very attacks that are happening right now.
Jamil Jaffer, great to see you, Jamil. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Coming up, a heart